Hello, this is Pat Oedy-Murray, and welcome to the Virtuous Life. As you all know, during the month of October, if you're a regular listener to the show, we kind of get ready for All Saints Day by talking about saints. And I always think this is a great time to look at saints maybe we've never heard of. And so in kind of preparation for this, I was scouring numerous sites that I always read and look at in order to get guests on our show. And I came across an article about a Catholic priest who was a farm boy in Kansas, and he has been named Servant of God. He's on his way to sainthood. So I read this article, and I was quite taken by it because I'd never heard of this guy, this priest from Kansas, and saw that it was written by someone called Larry Peterson. And so I thought, well, geez, I wonder what other articles he wrote. So as I looked, there were lots of articles that Larry has written on saints, on the Blessed Virgin Mary, lots of them. And so I tracked him down through his website, his blog that he does, and I got a hold of him, and he was more than willing to come on the show and talk about some of these very interesting saints that you may not have heard of, or people that are on their way to sainthood. So let me tell you a little bit about Larry Peterson. He is a former reinforcing iron worker from New York City. He's a Catholic blogger and posts commentary weekly. His work has appeared in such publications as Licia, Zenit from Rome, New Evangelist, Top Catholic Blogs, Big Pulpit, Catholic365.com, and others. His first children's picture book was called Slippery Willy Stupid Ugly Shoes. I'm really interested about that one. That was published in 2011. And in 2012, his first full-length novel, The Priest and the Peaches, was released. His second novel, The Demons of Abaddon, was released in the spring of 2016. His latest novel, Horizon Homeless, was released in an ebook format in May of 2017, and a paperback followed on July 27th of 2017. He belongs to the Catholic Writers Guild, the Catholic Writers Society. He's a member of the Knights of Columbus and the St. Vincent de Paul Society. He's an extraordinary minister of Holy Communion for over 20 years, bringing communion to the homebound and the hospitalized. And you can find him at his blog site, which is cradlingcatholic.com. Lots of good stuff there. You can see his archives. You can see all kinds of articles. And the wonderful thing about his articles, you know, it's something you can read fairly quick. There are a couple pages, 2-3 articles, but a lot of food for thought within them. So that was a long intro, but welcome, Larry, to the show.
Well, thank you.
I can tell that, when we talk, you kind of have that New York City accent. You haven't lost that, have you?
Well, no, and I refused to because I didn't know I had one until I moved to Florida, and somebody said, you're from New York, and I said, how do you know? Well, you talk funny. I said, I do not. You talk funny.
I love it. Last week I had somebody on from Great Britain, and so, everybody was like, oh, yeah, I guess we can tell he's from Great Britain because he had an accent too. So, Larry, first of all, is there anything else? Because I know that was a long introduction, and we were doing some show prep before we started here, and I didn't really get a chance to ask you, was there anything else you would like to have included in your introduction? So is there anything else that you would like to tell the audience about yourself before we start jumping into talking about saints?
I don't know. I mean, I'm widowed twice.
Okay.
That was my and that's like, and you know what? What's the difference? That's what my first wife. We went out from when we were like 16 years old. Married 35 years, and she died. She had cancer. And I got married 4 years later, and my second wife, women should stay away from me. She came down with, she was never sick, and she came down with lymphoma, and then she had Alzheimer's, and she passed away. And,
oh, my.
So, anyway,
yeah.
But, I keep on laughing. And tragically, I lost my one son 1 year ago.
Oh,
that was,
my.
That was very unexpected. He wasn't sick.
Oh.
Anyway, it was something happened with the heart, and That was that. But anyway, otherwise, I'm okay.
Okay.
I got my faith, and it carries me through a lot of stuff.
Yeah. So, Larry, what got you interested in doing writing? Because your bio says you were
I've always... an
iron worker.
I did that because of circumstances. I was going to go to Fordham University. I had a scholarship, and my mother died when we were kids. I was the oldest of 5, and my father, he died right after that, and I was in charge. So I had to go to work, and that's what happened. And that's why I wound up working. So taking care of the kids. When
you were thinking of going to college, were you thinking of writing at that point? Or was
actually I was.
Okay.
But we did good. We all stayed together, and my brothers were young, and my brothers were like, when my mom died, my brothers were 2, 6, and 10.
Wow.
And I was like 15, and my sister was 13, et cetera. And but we all hung together, and me and my sister took care of business.
Yeah. Wow, that's great. So
anyway, that's why I wound up in the ironworkers.
That would make sense. So, Larry, what was your interest in, because you've written, I couldn't even begin to count. I just went through the ones on Catholic Writers Guild, this week, to pick some out. But what gave you the impulse to write about these saints that, like, probably very few of us know anything about? Like, how did you find out about these people? What made you move in that direction to write about these saints?
I don't really remember what triggered me to do that. I just, I guess I caught a few stories about them, and I just started doing it. And one thing led to the other, and I started checking encyclopedias and the Catholic saints book. What do they call it? The hagiography or whatever.
Yeah, the butlers. And
there's so many. There's thousands and thousands of saints we've never heard of.
Right.
And we hear the main ones: Saint Anthony, Saint Teresa, Padre Pio. Like that.
Yeah.
Everybody knows. But people I mentioned, nobody has ever heard of really. Emil Capuan, he's pretty well known. He's a Knights of Columbus too.
Oh.
He was in the Knights of Columbus. And
was he really?
So he is well known with the Knights.
Okay.
And I'm a Knight.
Yes.
Anyway, and I think that's what led me to him.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about him, because this was the first article that I kind of stumbled on as I was looking at different saints. And again, he's a servant of God, so he started the canonization process. He's not a saint yet. But I was, first of all, taken, I'm a farm girl. So when I saw farm boy to priest to hero, I thought, ooh, I got to read this, So the idea with him was that he was kind of from the small town, right? And his parents were immigrants from Czechoslovakia. Is that correct?
Yep.
And
Czech immigrant.
Yeah. So what can you kind of tell us about his life growing up? I mean, do you look into any more depth, or are you trying to just kind of get the overview of the saint and present it?
Well, as far as the early lives, I usually try to get basically an overview, because a lot of the articles which I submitted to different places, they have word count,
Right, exactly.
I mean, I could get running with 2,000 words, no problem, but you want to keep it like 800 and that kind of thing.
Right.
And so mostly, kind of it's an overview up to there, entering the seminary, or how to get into the seminary, etc.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, just popped into my head, Augustus Tolton. You know about him, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you know about him. But I've done about him too. I did him years ago before anybody heard about him.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's he's on the way to being canonized too. He's a servant of God.
Right.
Anyway, I digress. So Emil went into. I do that a lot. Coffee. But anyway, he was in the army in World War II. He was in Burma, etc. And then he went to Korea, and that's when the American forces were surprised by the mounting attack of the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they came from everywhere, and they were, a bunch of them were captured, and what we have here, 3,000 American soldiers were unexpectedly attacked by a force of like 20,000.
Yeah.
and a lot of them, of course, they didn't make it. And Father Capone, he went from foxhole to foxhole, anointing and doing what he could. And then they had I think they took them on. Let me just recheck here. An 87-mile death march to a POW camp. He was captured along with many of the the soldiers.
Right.
And he went an 87-mile death march, and it was freezing cold in Korea. It was like really 0 degrees and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And he inspired them all. He kept working with them and talking to them and praying with them. And they hated him. They punished him all, and they made this man stand barefoot on a block of ice out in the courtyard in this freezing cold, just to torture him, you know?
Yeah.
And he took the place of others who were being tortured and all this other stuff. He just was amazing.
And what did and wasn't one of his one of the things is that the reason they were always torturing him was because he refused kind of to stop praying with people, right? I mean,
exactly. Yeah. And he even did the rosary, you know, and stuff like that. Yeah, they did not like that, and he just stood his ground, and he suffered greatly for it. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And he died. He died there.
Mm-hmm.
And he got the Medal of Honor. He was given the Medal of Honor.
When I read your story, I was amazed by a couple of things. First of all, that he was a very good student, and he became a priest. He joined the Army chaplains, but then he left the Army so that he could kind of seek an advanced degree in education. But yet he re-enlists. Even after he has his master's degree, he re-enlists. And that's,
well, it was probably the Korean conflict brought him back, you know.
Yeah. And I thought, man, to know that you're going to be ministering to guys that, might be involved in this war, to leave kind of what you were doing in order to do that was certainly heroic. That's for sure.
Without a doubt.
And I found it interesting too that all of this happens, this whole attack by these Chinese troops, after midnight on November 2nd, All Souls Day. I mean, there just seems to be some kind of a connection there for me anyway.
Well, there are so many signs like that happen, and you noticed, you picked up on that.
Yeah.
And, it's like, I don't know what the message is, but it is a sign.
Yeah. That
the good Lord is there, and He's watching out, and even though it's horror going on, it's hard to figure out, right?
It is, yeah. But some of the stuff you've talked about already, I guess I never thought about that. I never really talked to a military chaplain who was actually in the heat of a battle, and
and that was 20,000 against 3,000. They didn't have much of a chance, those poor guys back then.
Yeah.
They never knew that was coming,
Yeah. And, and you talked about him, going from, that he was anointing, and he was hearing confessions in the midst of all that.
Exactly.
I mean,
he's doing just what he was supposed to do, and he did it.
Yeah.
And, he did, he was willing to take the bullet if need be.
Yeah. And he constantly went back and picked up guys that were wounded and tried to get them to safety,
amazing.
Yeah. And did that so many times that's when he was actually, taken prisoner.
He's a great guy. He was a great man, and he was a great American hero.
Yeah.
And he's a great American Catholic hero.
Yes. And I think one of the things that also kind of took me as I read your article was on this death march that you described, that, if the wounded couldn't make it, they'd just be shot dead. So he actually picked up, a wounded and carried him on his back.
He did the best he could. Yeah, exactly.
And encouraged others that could still, were somewhat in decent health to do the same thing. I thought, oh my gosh. I mean, what a witness. And they said other soldiers did that. They picked up.
That's what he did, really. More than anything, I think he inspired the others.
Yeah.
His faith and his strength like that, he inspired so many other guys to keep going.
Yeah.
Because they were in dire straits, no doubt.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And so he did amazing.
Yeah. So one of the things, and I wondered, I didn't know if in your research for this article, if you came across it, and I know it might have been some time since you've written this, but you talked about on Easter Sunday of 1951, they allowed him, his captors, to wear his purple stole, and he couldn't say Mass, but he could read some psalms. And you said, everybody kind of came together and read.
Yeah, they wouldn't let him say Mass, but he'd get permission to read from the Missal.
Yeah.
And he said some prayers for Easter Sunday. It was pretty amazing,
Yeah.
He read the prayers from Good Friday and then including the Stations of the Cross.
Yeah.
And,
so, Larry,
many of these guys were crying as he did all this. It was amazing.
Yeah.
They were in such a terrible place.
Yeah. So, Larry, did you, in your research, did you find anything that would give you a clue as to why his captors would have allowed him to do that on Easter Sunday when they had been so terrible to him?
I think that's the Holy Spirit maybe somehow attacking with the guards or interfering with their meanness, if that makes any sense. Because, I think that's what happened. If they saw how hard this guy was working for his men and taking care of them, and they were torturing him constantly, and he stood against it. So I think they realized Easter Sunday was a big deal with the Americans, and they gave them a break. That's all I can come up with on that one. Okay.
And he died May 23rd of 1951. And so where are we at in this canonization process with him? Do you know? I mean, other than servant of God?
Servant of God, once you're a servant of God, they send you to the Congregation for the Cross as a saint.
Okay.
And then there's like 10 on that panel, and they review the person. It can take years, and the Pope has to declare the person a man or woman of heroic virtue.
Okay.
And if he declares them a person of heroic virtue, they'll be declared venerable.
Okay.
Then he'll be venerable, Emil Capon. And then the next step up with that is beatification.
Okay.
And today, now, if you're martyred, they say that's in odium fidei, in hatred of the faith, you're automatically beatified.
Okay.
You go by the servant of God and venerable thing, So there's many people killed, and especially like in the Cristero War, the Spanish Civil War.
Right.
The Nazis, they killed Yusuf for hatred.
Yeah.
Like the Almas we mentioned on the phone, the whole family.
Yes.
They were killed out of hatred to the faith. They were, and they were murdered, and they were beatified.
Yeah.
So September 10th.
Now, in your article, you mentioned that there are currently 2 miracles under investigation attached to him. Do you know? And I mean, do you know anything about those?
Father
Capon. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's right at the end of your article. You said of the selfless priest is underway, and there are currently 2 miracles under investigation.
You know what? I don't really have any. I don't have anything on it right now.
All right.
In my head. I must have. I don't know what they were. No, I just don't.
Okay. Because when I read that, I
don't think we have time for me to go looking.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's okay. But I thought that was very interesting because I thought, oh, geez, he's servant of God. He's just kind of getting rolling, and they're already looking at 2 miracles that might be attached to him. Obviously, he won like the Congressional Medal of Honor, Distinguished Service Cross, Bronze Star. Lots of awards. Have you, when you were reading about him, did you come across any like personal testimonies of people that actually were in the prison camp with him?
No, I didn't.
Okay. I just wondered if there were any of those.
If I was going to go into something more in depth, I might have.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm limited. Like they're not, like you said in your intro about. They're not very long articles. Some are, very few are over 1,000 words.
Right. Well, before we've got a little bit of time here in the first half of the show. So we've talked about Father Capone as servant of God, starting this this canonization process. There's another person whose life that you wrote about that really kind of amazed me, and I think it's a very hopeful story for people who are just struggling in life, and that is another servant of God, Joseph Dutton. I think his story is really interesting too, especially, I mean, obviously his post-conversion, but he was older when he kind of had this conversion experience. So he had lived kind of an interesting life prior to that. What can you kind of tell us? And his original name was not Joseph. It was Ira Barnes Dutton, right?
Yeah. I got to, hold on a minute.
Sure.
I've lost him for a minute.
Okay.
Well, okay.
Did you find him?
I'm getting there.
Okay. Well, while you're looking here, I'm going to let the audience know a little bit about him, and then you can jump in. Let me know when you find him.
Okay.
He was originally born in Stowe, Vermont in 1843, and was entirely kind of in a Protestant environment. You got it?
I do have him.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought this was interesting that he worked in a bookstore in Wisconsin when the Civil War began. So
I got to refresh on him. It's been a few years since I wrote about him.
Okay. So he's just an interesting guy because of also of his time frame, 1843. To be a part of that Civil War, he actually served for 4 years with the Wisconsin Regiment, but didn't see a lot of fighting. It said, but he has an interesting life in that. Yeah, he was born and raised Protestant, and how he went. I'm just refreshing here. Sure.
Baptized on his 40th birthday. He fell away from it. And then he found Catholicism. Yeah, that's right. It's coming back to me.
Yeah. Well, and
he got a catechism. Yeah, he got all the catechism. He began to study. He became a Catholic on April 27th, 1883, on his 40th birthday.
Yeah. But even prior to that, even prior to his conversion, I think what is in this article speaks to the hearts of lots of people, in the sense that, when he left the Army, he worked at different jobs for 20 years. He married. The woman was unfaithful. They were divorced in 1881. So he has this kind of this past that a lot of people, would say, well,
Well, that's a good point. He did. He was kind of drifting aimlessly, getting in and out of trouble, so to speak, not on his own fault.
Right.
But just making bad decisions and things like that. And then he was even working in cemeteries.
Yeah. And
how you wind up working in the cemeteries,
And I love the distillery in Alabama. I thought that was interesting.
There you go. Yeah. And then he's working on the railroads, and anyway, then he finds Catholicism. It's kind of interesting.
And
find Catholicism. Yeah. I'm so impressed with people who. I'm a cradle Catholic. Mm-hmm. Blog site says cradle, but people who actually make a conscious decision as adults to embrace Catholicism, I'm very, very amazed at them, and I really respect them a lot. Because they're making a conscious choice as an adult to grab this religion that's so ridiculed, especially today.
Right.
Right. And he did it.
Yeah. And I found it interesting too that he ended up becoming an alcoholic. Because you could just sense from everything you wrote up until his conversion experience about him that this was a man who had gifts and talents but was lost. He was just lost.
Exactly.
And he tried to, pull off kind of, working and being successful at his jobs, all these jobs he did. But still at night he would come home and get drunk, and you just knew.
The guy was so full of guilt. He actually entered the Trappists.
Yeah.
And you got to really be feeling some serious guilt to do that, and he did. But he stayed 20 months, and then he left. He knew he needed something else. And then next thing you know, he goes to Molokai in Hawaii, and that's amazing.
Yeah. I mean,
you know?
Yeah, he wasn't just one of these guys that, converted to Catholicism and that was it. I mean,
no, he worked at it.
Yeah. And I mean, he even changes his name because he was Ira, and he changes it to Joseph, because he greatly admired St. Joseph.
He didn't want to be called a Pharisee or something like that. No. So he changed it to Joseph. A good pick.
Yeah. And you sense that probably for him was a real sign of changing his life too. I mean, kind of putting off that old life. St. Paul tells us, you got to put off your old life and take on the new. And that's what he does. I mean, it is so clear in reading your article that he becomes Catholic, but it's not just joining a church. This is a deep conversion for him. And like you said, he goes to this Trappist monastery because he kind of wants to make penance for his past. More than just going to confession. He wanted to do more than that, He
wrote to Teddy Roosevelt and Roosevelt answered the letter and was really impressed by this guy,
Mm-hmm.
So stuff was coming from his heart deep down for the president to actually respond to him.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
But,
he was amazing. And I think, one of the lines that you wrote that I thought was amazing when after his 20 months, when he decides to go to Molokai, the line you wrote was, he realized he needed to do penitential action and not penitential contemplation. And
right. He had to walk the talk, right?
Yes. And that's
pretty cool.
Yeah. And so that's when he actually then prepares to leave for Molokai, and he actually does get to serve with Father Damien for a couple years before Saint Damien ends up dying of leprosy himself. Yeah. So I mean, I think his story was just amazing. And in fact, one of the quotes you give from Father Damien was, "I can die now because Brother Joseph will take care of my orphans."
Right.
So he really sensed.
Well, the quote of Father Damien approached him, and Joseph said to him, "My name is Joseph Dutton. I've come here to help, and I come to stay."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he came there and he was going to do it and stay there and stay with the lepers and help Father Damien, and he didn't care.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, we are at the end already of the first half of the show, so I want to let everybody know that Larry Peterson is with us today. He is...
and he hasn't ran away or anything.
No, and he's a Catholic Christian blogger, and he's got lots of short stories on saints, and that's what we're talking about. So come back on the other side of the break to hear more about some more of these people on the road to sainthood or our saints. You're listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Oedy-Murray. Hello and welcome back to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Oedy-Murray, and just wanted you to know who we're talking to today. We're talking to Larry Peterson. He's got a long bio, so if you want to know all of it, you can listen to the beginning of the show again and hear it. I'm just going to give you a little bit of it. He is a Catholic Christian blogger, has commentaries that he posts weekly. His works appeared in such publications as Litia, Zenit of Rome, New Evangelist, Top Catholic Blogs, Big Pulpit, Catholic365.com, and others. And one of the ways you can pull up his articles pretty easily is if you go to the Catholic Writers Guild website. That's where I got numerous ones of these. He's also a member of the Catholic Writers Society, Knights of Columbus, St. Vincent de Paul Society, Extraordinary Minister of Holy Communion. He's obviously a very busy man, and so I was happy to get him on the show. And what attracted me to try to hunt Larry down and find him and bring him on was he's written so many articles, not just on saints, but on people who are making their way through the canonization process. So if you happen to miss the first half of the show, we were talking about two servants of God. One was Emil Kapan, and he is from Kansas, the state of Kansas here in the United States. And another is servant of God, Joseph Dutton. So we talked about them in the first half of the show. If you'd like to hear more about them, please go back and listen to this on our app where you can get all of our shows, all of our replay shows. The second half of the show, we're going to talk about someone who is beatified, not yet a saint. And also, we're going to talk about a couple saints if we have time. So first of all, I want to welcome you back, Larry. Thanks for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Pat.
One of the things that I wanted to talk about, because there has been so much discussion on abuse victims, especially the movie Sound of Freedom came out about sex trafficking and the child abuse that goes on there.
Yeah.
And
I saw that movie.
Yeah. And with the border situation, it sounds like there's lots of that kind of stuff happening. So when I read this one, she's the patroness of abuse victims. And I thought, oh, what a person to know about. A lot of people don't know about her, and her name is Blessed Laura Vacuna. So she has a really interesting pre-story too, in the sense that she just even her mom and dad, that her dad was wealthy, her mom wasn't, and her dad's family kind of disowns all of them once he and Mercedes marry.
Right.
I found that interesting. Now, what happens to her dad that puts them in this situation?
Well, her dad was Joseph, right?
Right.
He was killed. He was killed. He was killed in battle, and Mom was alone, and she hooked up with this guy. What's his name? Manuel
Mora. Yeah.
Yeah, and he just wanted her to be his concubine, so to speak.
Right.
And he would take care of them.
Right.
And her mom, desperate, kind of moved in with him, and Laura was very upset about that because she knew it was like sinful and all. Right. And she felt like it was her responsibility. She was responsible for it. Because her mom would not have probably done that if she wasn't there. I don't know. That's what the motive was. But she was upset about it.
Well, and I think it was very apparent that this Manuel Mora was certainly using the idea of being able to give her children, like he said he could give them a Catholic education, because she certainly couldn't. She couldn't afford it. She was destitute. And so, he kind of tries to kind of manipulate her in the sense of, do this for your children.
I think he was just an outright dirtbag, and he had his eyes on her too.
Oh, yeah.
He's waiting for her to get a little older. And anyway.
So she ends up...
so many stories.
Yeah. So she ends up moving, as you said, to that ranch with her children. But he keeps his promise, and he lets Laura enroll.
Yes, he gets the education and all that, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And so she actually is enrolled with the Daughters of Mary, Help of Christians, which are Salesians. I'd never thought about the Salesian Sisters of Don Bosco. I just knew of the Salesians, so that was a whole new thing. But Laura becomes quite at a very young age, quite involved in her faith, a deep faith. And I was amazed of what you...
And the nuns guided them, too. The nuns helped them a lot.
Yeah.
They gave them, they took care of the scholarships for them, so they didn't have to worry about money or anything like that.
Yeah.
And that was a big deal for Mom.
Yeah. And I thought what she wrote, because obviously we're in the Eucharistic revival, so I'm always looking for things like this. Yeah. But you said in her first communion notebook, she wrote, "Oh my God, I want to love and serve you all my life. I give you my soul, my heart, and my whole self." I mean, oh my gosh. You think of a little girl like that.
No, really, it's true.
Yeah, that has that kind of depth of understanding of what she's doing. I think sometimes a lot of us Catholics, adult Catholics, when we receive communion, don't understand how important this is and what it means for us, and she was only 10 years old. But like you said, when she kind of came home from school, she was quite bothered. It was at an age where she understood, and what she had learned at school, she understood that her mother was actually living in sin, that she was living with this guy, and she just felt terrible about it. And she really started praying that her mom would start following God's commandments again. And again, I find that so amazing for such a little girl, that she starts to pray for her mother. She
starts to pray that she would be sick and take her.
Yeah.
Right?
Right, yeah.
And before I die, Mother, would I have the joy of seeing you repent?
Yeah.
Imagine?
Yeah.
Because that in tune to what sin can do to you, at her age.
Yeah.
And
she herself.
And she's dying, and she's saying, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Mary. God, goodbye, Mother. And now I die happy because anyway."
Yeah,
amazing.
It is.
It's amazing.
And the reason I take it right that she becomes the patron of abuse victims is because she herself then was beat by Manuel.
Manuel, he probably did more to her than that.
Yeah,
Yeah, he was just that way, and that was his.
Yeah,
guys like that are disgusting.
Yeah,
but anyway.
yeah, and I found it. I found it interesting that of course, in your article you say he beat her because that she wanted to be a nun, but right. Also you said you think he probably had some designs on her or harbored lust in his heart after her. But when the sisters found this out, then they stepped in. And, said, we'll give you scholarships. You don't have to do this. And and that really took the pressure off her mom,
Definitely.
Yeah. And I found that, again, you talk about a young girl who is willing to sacrifice, in the sense of praying that, she wanted to take on, because she had read and been taught by the nuns that no one has greater love than to give up one's life for one's friends. And she,
really, she deserves being beatified.
Oh yeah, I mean, and to have I think about how the roles here are so reversed from what we normally hear. That it is a child who's worried about her mom's soul. It's usually the opposite.
No, really. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And she was so filled with grace that she felt that.
Yeah.
And then on a deathbed, how old was she? She was young. She was a kid.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Mary. Goodbye, Mother. Now I die happy. And she had asked the Mama just before what'd she say? Mama, I offer my life for you before I die. Mother, would I have the joy of seeing you repent?
Yep. Yeah.
I mean, geez.
Yeah. It's powerful.
So, to be even aware of that happening.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
And to make that, I think about in my prayer life, sometimes I don't want to offer God too much. Because he might take me up on it, and that's exactly.
You think God don't know what you're thinking?
I know.
You think you're tricking him?
No, I don't think I'm tricking him. But it's like at least I'm not saying it. But she asked Jesus to take her mom, or to take her, so her mom could be saved.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I mean, actually say, Lord, I'm willing to give you my whole life. You can take my life. Just make sure my mom is saved, that she, really repents.
For a child to be that in depth with her spirituality, it's amazing.
It is.
That's the hand of God working in her.
Yeah. And
that was a great gift to her mother, actually, from God, giving that child to her to help her save her own soul.
You are right. Very right. That's very true. Yeah. So, and just to kind of finish this out for the audience so they know, and she died from her illness. It doesn't say what her illness was, but she died.
Well, a lot of it had to do from her getting beat up too, apparently.
Oh, okay. So she died in 1904, she wasn't even 13 yet when she died.
Right. Yeah, she was just a teenager. Just turned. Give me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that guy, Manuel, was quite the salt of the earth, wasn't he?
I'll tell you, it's how awful. And so she was beatified by Pope St. John Paul II on September 3rd, 1988. And she is the patroness of abuse victims, incest victims, and children who have suffered the loss of their parents. That's an amazing, amazing story, Larry. I'm so glad you were able to find out about her and share that with us.
Did I ask you if you've heard of Nellie Organ? Did I ask you that at the beginning?
No, because we were talking about St. Alice, but no. Tell us about Nellie Organ since you brought her up.
Well, little Nellie Organ was a 2-year-old. Her father was in the British Army, and they were stationed in Ireland. And for some reason, this child had this incredible spirituality, and she knew that Jesus was present in the Blessed Sacrament. When she'd walk into church with them, she'd say, "Holy God is in lockdown," because she knew that she was 2 years old. Mm-hmm. She knew that the soldiers talked about people in the brig. It was called they were in lockdown.
Okay.
So she'd say Jesus is in lockdown. I'll try to make this brief.
Go ahead.
She, by the time she was 3, her mother died. She died. She was holding her mother in her little arms around her mom, and her mom died. Mm. And her dad in the military couldn't take care of them. He had 4 kids.
Right.
2 boys were sent to the Christian Brothers, and the 2 girls were sent to the nuns. I can't remember the order off the top of my head.
Okay.
But anyway, little Nellie was. They found out she was sick. She had a twisted spine from being when she fell, and all of this. As a child, somebody dropped her, and she never complained about anything. But a girl, Mary Long, was sent to stay with her in her room, and she hear her crying at night, and she never complained. She told the nuns, and they found out about this twisted spine, and they tried their best to take care of her, but they found that she had tuberculosis like her mother was dying. She had like 6 months to live.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, she asked if she could receive Holy Communion. She would ask the nuns in the chapel when they were coming back from communion, would they give her a kiss, because she could smell Jesus in their mouth.
Oh.
It's a little kid. It's a little 3-year-old, right?
Wow.
And so she asked for permission to receive, and back then the youngest you could receive was 12. Mm-hmm. And that had been in place for many years.
Right.
And she got permission to receive her confirmation, and then the bishop did, when they knew she was dying, they did give her permission to receive Holy Communion. Pope Pius X heard about this, and he'd been looking for a reason to lower the age to 7 or 6 on Holy Communion. Mm-hmm. And he heard about Nellie Organ, and he wrote, Quam Singulari was I guess in a directive or whatever, he wrote lowering the age to 7. And it was because of little Nellie Organ. And he put out a thing about her. May all children learn to be like little Nellie and all, and pray to her and all this other stuff.
Wow.
So this kid was like 3 years and 8 months old when she died.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an amazing story. And if you go and check it out, you could... I'm sure the picture will come up with her. Her picture's in there. So she's in a little First Communion dress and everything. Oh. But it's amazing. Yeah, it's beautiful. And that's why you receive our First Communion when we're 7 years old.
Yeah, because of her.
Her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
but she's a child, so she's automatically, I think, a saint anyway. I mean, you can at 3 years old, you don't have to use a reason to do anything bad, sin. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if she's up for canonization or anything like that. I don't think so. But
now I'm real curious, Larry. I'm going to have to look her up, because I'm going to have to find out about that, because you'd say she was called Little Nellie of Holy God. So Little Nellie of Holy God.
Well, her name was Ellen Organ, and they started calling her Nellie. Why that? And who knows? Nellie. Sure. But yeah, Little Nellie of Holy God, because she called God in Jesus, Holy God. He was in lockdown.
Yeah.
In the tabernacle.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the mouth of babes sometimes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even our little friend Laura Vicuna here, she was only 13, so when she was 10 or 11, and she was going through this stuff with this guy, Manuel. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure if her mom was aware, but I'm sure she probably was.
Especially when he beat her up. I mean, her mom could not
be. She was beating a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
So she had to be aware of that. So, it's just amazing. And I think sometimes the simple faith of somebody Blessed Laura and like little Nellie, just this simple faith. They don't have all this deep theological insights into everything. They just love God and they live it out, and it's like, and with Laura, just taking the words of Scripture to her heart. No greater love than to lay down your life for a friend. Just really taking that to heart.
They're such examples for us.
Yeah,
we don't hear about them. We don't hear about them enough.
Yeah, we really don't. Saints are they're just amazing. Well, in the time we have left here, there's a couple more I want to touch on with you. And what is Saint Alice? Because I never realized there was even a Saint Alice, and she's the patroness of the blind and paralyzed. And as I was looking at this article, and just to let the audience know, she was born in 1207 near Brussels, which is Belgium now. And she was a pretty healthy child, but then she started getting sick. And at age 7, she ended up going to an abbey, the Cistercian La Cambre Abbey, that they thought she would regain maybe some of her health there, but she never left. What can what about her becomes so interesting for us?
This gal is only a child. She's a 7-year-old child when she entered the Cistercian order, right?
Right.
And she was only Alice.
Yeah.
And
there's no last name given for her. It's just like where she's from.
Alice of Schaerbeek.
Yeah, and that was the town she was from.
Yeah, and we're talking early. What century was this? Oh, 13th century.
Yeah.
1204. Some of these people in the 3rd and 4th century.
Right. Yeah.
She was frail and weak, and she was, age of 7, sent to the order in hopes of regaining some of her strength. She must have really had something wrong.
Yeah. And she was very much, she
had leprosy, which is Hansen's disease.
But she didn't develop that till she was like 20 years old. So 20
years old, yeah.
Yeah. So
but there was something going on with her.
Yeah, before that
system anyway. Before that, for sure.
Right. But she decided to kind of stay at the abbey, didn't she? I mean, for all of her, for all of her life.
She wanted to accept her sufferings apparently, and use them to help the souls in purgatory. Now she's a kid too, So here she is going through all of this, and she's offering up to the souls in purgatory. Yeah, and willing to accept it.
Yeah, exactly.
And she's always had an upbeat attitude in all of this business. Anyway, let me, as I'm reviewing this quickly.
Go ahead. Yeah,
46 years old. She had lived blind, paralyzed, and in intense pain for more than 25 years. Imagine that.
Yeah.
And she was 46. She was a teenager, and she was blind, paralyzed, and in intense pain for more than 25 years. Mm-hmm. And she died at the age of 46, puts her around 18 years old.
Well, she was born in 1204, so she was at 46 when she died.
No, I'm just saying. When she turned blind, paralyzed, yes. And she was like a teenager.
20, I think you wrote, 20. So just out of her teens, all of that was happening. So, because you said, in your article, you stated she was 20 when she developed leprosy, and then all these other things started happening.
Well, she had lived blind, paralyzed, and with intense pain for more than 25 years. Did I make a typo there, maybe?
No, that's okay, because she died at 46, so that would be right. 20, she'd be 21.
24, yeah, she'd be 21, exactly.
Yeah, so that's right.
Yeah, I got it right. What do you know?
Well, and the thing that amazed me about her, too, was where she found her consolation through all of this,
Pius X was involved, confirmed her status as a canonized saint. He was involved with her, too.
Yes.
I love St. Pius X.
Yeah, me too. But she always said she received her joy and consolation from the Holy Eucharist. And I thought, oh my, here's another one, that, and this I thought was really interesting, Larry, that you wrote, that she couldn't take the wine from the chalice because of her disease, but Jesus appeared to her and told her that he was fully present in either the bread or the wine, and she shouldn't worry because he was with her. Because I hear people talk about that today. I want to receive both. Well, if you receive the host, you're receiving all of Jesus.
You're receiving all of it, right? Yeah.
So,
heck yeah.
Yeah. And so here's St. Alice, who, he actually tells her that, don't worry about that, which is to me an amazing thing, because I think we as Catholics need to hear that, because we get, a little bent out of shape about that sometimes.
I guess you got to be really special too for Jesus to actually show up in front of you and give you some advice, tell you not to worry. Yeah. Wouldn't that be cool?
It would be cool. I would love it. I would, that way I know for sure it was true instead of,
Then you really better not mess up if that ever happens.
I know. But she, even in those, like you said, she was in this kind of intense pain for like 25 years of her life. And she always remained joyful because Jesus was with her.
She embraced it. Yeah, she embraced it. Yeah.
Yeah. And it again came to her in the Eucharist. I mean, here we are in the Eucharistic revival, and how many Catholics don't go to church or don't believe this is Jesus? And here's this girl, this woman, in these last 25 years of her life, that is the thing that sustained her. It's amazing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So, and obviously her suffering, and how she suffered is certainly a witness for all of us. That's for sure. So, the last one we have time to talk about, Larry, I'm checking my time here. We still have time. So, I want to talk about, because I thought your title was funny. But I loved reading the story. Your title was, Did You Know That St. Bernard dogs are named after a real saint? Meet St. Bernard of, I think it's Menthon?
Menthon. Yeah, Menthon. That was I think that was Switzerland or France. Borders there.
Yeah. I found this because, again, how often do you think of dogs being actually named after a saint?
Before there was, it was only in the 11th century. I can't remember the Pope's name offhand, who decided we had to have rules for canonization. Mm-hmm. Prior to that, in the first 1,000 years of the church, saints were made. There was no communication like we have today. You lived in a village and they say somebody lived there, and that person was a saint. They were such a good person, and they would declare Saint Johnny a saint or something like that.
Exactly.
There was one town, I can't remember where it was. I got too much clutter in my head. But they named the dog a saint.
Oh.
Really, I'm not making that up. I can't remember Saint Dol, whatever. And they found out when they made the transition into learning about who these people were and how they were canonized, rural area, whatever. They found out it was a dog, and they had to cancel him out. He wasn't qualified.
Yeah. That whole free will thing of doing things from conscience just wouldn't fit him. That's for sure.
Yeah, and that's what they did back then, and this kind of accepted.
This guy comes from a rich family, and again a noble family, and they think it was around the year of 1020 that he was born.
Yeah.
And he had because his parents were well off, they hired a tutor for him, and his tutor was religious. So the tutor was the one who kind of gets him involved in prayers and all that kind of stuff. But I found it interesting that this tutor also like to, take Bernard up on these spontaneous hikes up into the mountains. And like you said, little did we know that was going to have such a deep impression on him. So he
didn't make his parents happy though, because they planned to marry him off. They wanted him to get married or something, and the guy who was helping him was more religious and teaching him about religion.
Right.
Like I say, taking him up to the mountains and.
I
think his parents even met.
They arranged a marriage.
They arranged a marriage for him, and he said, "No, I don't want to do that."
Yeah.
And he the night before. Oh, you had to be the night before his arranged wedding, and he climbed. He shot from his castle and fell 40 feet from a window to the ground. Oh my goodness! The Noah was caught by angels and gently lowered to the ground, unhurt. Most likely, he managed to escape the castle in a more traditional manner. That's probably true.
Yeah,
he probably walked out.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But again, I think you're right. There is another witness for us, right? The idea that he had a calling to the priesthood, and his parents really wanted him to get married, but they respected his his call, which I think was really. You don't very
often hear of the parents marrying off the guy. It's usually the other way around.
Exactly. You're very true.
So anyway.
So he goes on and studies for the priesthood, and his parents finally do kind of give him their blessing. And when he's ordained, he decides to go to the Alps to do kind of missionary work, which is very interesting. I'm not even sure, just probably because he loved the mountains, right? I mean, that's
definitely. You got to love that to do that.
Yeah, and you wrote about how there were still a lot of pagan customs and things like that in these little towns up in the Alps. So he ministered up there for 42 years to these different places. And
he built a hospice and monastery up to like 9,000 feet above sea level.
Yeah.
Again,
because that was dangerous too. I mean, that was a danger to be up in the mountains was dangerous. Avalanches, all these kinds of things, exposure.
Definitely.
So by building those
amazing
things,
people out there,
Yeah.
And they're not, and these people, for the most part, empty themselves, and they don't think about themselves. It's always thinking about others.
Yes.
And it's really, and that really goes to a lot of the saints.
Yeah.
They're all like that, where they, even to dying.
Yeah.
They will just do it, give of themselves. And that's why these people are such great role models for us, especially the young people.
Yeah.
And the young people don't hear about any of them, really. They just don't.
Yeah. And we're close to closing out the show here. So I just want to let everybody know, so as we close out talking about St. Bernard, that he opened monasteries. And so the monks would take out these large dogs they had trained to help them find lost and injured travelers.
Right.
And so
that's why they became St. Bernards.
They become St. Bernards. I love it. What a great thing. And of course, St. Bernard is the saint of mountaineers, the patron of skiers, snowboarders, rock climbers, and his feast day is May 28th. So that kind of wraps up our quick look at 5 different saints or people on their way to sainthood. So, Larry, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. That is wonderful.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, and keep writing about these saints. I'll keep my eyes peeled for them.
Well, there's a lot more I have written, and, if you ever look through some and want to talk about them, let me know first.
I will. I'll email you, Larry.
I swear, Pat, I'll look. Does your email start with Pat or P or what?
P, yes, P, you're right.
All right. If I see a P, I'll pause. I won't hit delete.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. I want to let the audience know that we've been talking to Larry Peterson. He is a Catholic Christian and blogger, post commentary weekly. He's appeared on publications such as Alicia, Zenit from Rome, New Evangelist, Top Catholic Blogs, Big Pulpit, Catholic365.com, and others. He's a member of the Catholic Writers Guild, Catholic Writers Society. If you want to read some of these articles and read more about some of these, again, just short little blurbs that get you involved in these saints' lives, go to cradlingcatholic.com. So again, we're on our march to All Saints Day, which hopefully will be the feast day of all of us. Thank you for listening to The Virtuous Life. I'm your host, Pat Oedy-Murray. Hi, this is Pat Oedy-Murray from The Virtuous Life. I hope you'll join us this week as we talk to Larry Peterson about 5 saints you may know nothing about. So join us, won't you? Here on The Virtuous Life, Mondays and Saturdays at 4 p.m. on Annunciation Radio.